"You belong in a nursing home, not a palace." That's what my daughter-in-law said to me, laughing, in the front hall of the house I had bought and paid for with 31 years of my own work. 10 seconds earlier, my son had told me I was never to set foot on my own property again. They had decided to give my $12 million villa in Palm Beach to his wife's parents. I was 68 years old. I smiled. I nodded. I said, "All right." I picked up my hat, and I walked out of my own front door, and I did not raise my voice one single time. They thought they'd won. 11 days later, 3 moving trucks pulled up that driveway, and what was waiting inside that house made my daughter-in-law drop the keys on the marble floor of the entryway. Literally drop them. I'm getting ahead of myself. None of this means anything unless I tell it in the right order, so stay with me. Because this is a story about a man who was told he belonged in a home instead of a palace, and about what he decided to do with the palace instead. My name is Barrett Lockock. I'm 69 now. All of this happened when I was 68. I want to start with how I got that house because everything depends on it. My father drove a delivery route. My mother did payroll for a school district. We were fine, and we were not rich. I went to a state school on a partial scholarship and a summer job. I came out and went into industrial supply, pumps, valves, fittings, the unglamorous plumbing of American manufacturing. I was good at it. I spent 11 years learning the business from other people. Then at 33, I mortgaged everything I had and bought out a failing regional distributor. I spent the next 31 years building it. Nobody's ever heard of it, but by the time I sold, it was doing serious volume across 6 states and employing 411 people. I sold that company when I was 64, and that is where the money came from. All of it. 31 years, and then one Tuesday afternoon in a signature, and I bought the villa in Palm Beach. Now I want to be honest about that purchase. My wife, Coralie, had wanted a house on the water her entire life. She grew up in Ohio. At 19, she tore a picture out of a magazine, a white house, palm trees, a blue pool. She kept that picture for 40 years, through every lean stretch, through every brutal early year when I was on the road 200 nights a year. She never once, not one time in 41 years, asked me for it. She'd just take it out sometimes, usually in the winter, usually when things were hard, look at it for a minute, put it back. I bought her the house in the picture, near enough. $12 million, white, palms, a pool that looked out at the water. And here is the part I'll answer for. I bought it too late. Coralie was already sick when we closed. 6 weeks later we found out. She got 14 months in that house. Some good, most not. Then she died in the upstairs bedroom, in the house she'd wanted her whole life. I sat on the edge of that bed and understood, far too late to do anything about it, that I had spent 31 years buying a woman a house when what she wanted was a husband who came home. There was one good stretch, the second spring, about 5 weeks where she felt genuinely well. Every morning, I carried a chair down to the seawall, and she sat in it with coffee and watched the water. On about the third one, she said, "Barrett, this is the most time you've spent in one place since 1987. She was laughing. It went through me like a nail, because she was right, and we both knew what it had cost. 31 years I was gone, and I got 5 weeks of chairs by the water. That is the entire reason this story ends the way it does. Now let me tell you about my son. Chase is 39. He is my only child and I love him, and I want to say that clearly. Chase never had to want for anything. By the time he was old enough to notice, I was successful, and I was also absent. So I did what absent successful fathers do. I paid for school, cars, an apartment, a wedding, a business idea that lasted 19 months and cost me $240,000. A second idea that never got past a logo. He is not stupid, he is not lazy, he is a man who has never once in his life had to find out what he's actually capable of, because every time he approached the edge, his father wrote a check. I built that, that's my fault. He married Tatum 8 years ago. She is ambitious in a way my son isn't. She came from a family that didn't have much, and I understand wanting. I spent 31 years wanting. What I could never get past was the arithmetic. From the first year, every conversation with me had a purpose. Every visit had an ask. After Coralie died, the arithmetic got faster. I was 65. I had just lost my wife of 41 years. I was alone in a $12 million house with 11 rooms I never went into, and I was drowning. Chase said, "Dad, why don't we move in just for a while? You shouldn't be alone in here." And I said yes. We were lonely, and being lonely makes you generous in ways that people doing arithmetic can use. For 6 months it was genuinely good. Noise in the house, another coffee cup in the sink. Then it turned so slowly I couldn't point to the day. My study became a nursery guest room. My desk went into the garage. Corali's art came down, went into storage, replaced with things Tatum liked better. I said nothing. Paint on canvas. She's alive, and my wife isn't. There was an afternoon a designer came in and called me the father-in-law staying with them, and Tatum did not correct her. Then they suggested, with the baby coming, that I take the guest house at the back of the property. More privacy. Better for everyone. I moved out of the main house I had bought for my dying wife into the back at 66, and I told myself it was my idea. Once I was out there, I stopped being consulted about anything. Chase started calling it our place. First in front of me, then to guests, then to me without even catching himself. That house was mine. Solely. My name. A wire transfer from the sale of a business I built. No mortgage, no partnership, no trust. I had never signed one document giving my son any interest in that property. Not one. He simply began to behave as if it were his. And when nobody corrected him for 2 years, he stopped believing it was a question. Then came the night I heard them. Thursday in March. I walked up to get a book from what used to be my study. They were in the dining room with a bottle of wine, and Tatum's parents on speakerphone, and I stopped in the dark of that kitchen and listened to my son and my daughter-in-law plan my life. Her parents were selling their place in Port St. Lucie. They were moving into the front rooms, Coral's rooms, and Vonda asked, "And what about Barrett?" And Tatum said, "He's happy back there. Honestly, long-term, there's a Bonaventure or a Whitmore type of place. He'd have people his own age." And my son said, "Yeah, probably a year or 2. I stood in that dark kitchen at 68 years old and did not make a sound. The thing I felt was not rage, it was clarity. The cleanest feeling I'd had in my life. Like a light going on in a room I'd been feeling my way around for 3 years. In that moment, I understood something I had been refusing to understand since Corali died. My son was not going to become a different person. I had been waiting 20 years for that. The man in the dining room was the finished product, and I had made him. I got my book. I went back to the guest house. The next morning I called a lawyer. "Let me tell you about Constance Bowl, estate and elder law, recommended by the man who handled the sale of my company. No connection to my son, and that turned out to matter." I sat in her office and told her everything. She asked a question nobody had asked me in 3 years. "Mr. Lockock, what do you want?" And I couldn't answer, because I had spent 3 years being managed, and the strange, terrible thing about being managed is, you stop generating wants of your own. She let the silence sit. Then she asked, "If the house were gone tomorrow, what would you miss?" And I said, "Nothing." And I heard myself say it, and realized it was true. There was nothing in that building I wanted. My wife wasn't in it. Her art wasn't even in it. Constance said, "Then let's talk about what it could do instead." Over the following 11 weeks, I made a charitable gift of that property. That's the whole trick. No revenge scheme, no trap. A man who solely owns a piece of real property is allowed to give it away. I gave it to a foundation. What the foundation does is work in the gap that's been killing families in this county for years. Old people who have money on paper and nobody in the world who actually wants them, and families caring for aging parents being destroyed by it because respite care is unaffordable and there's nothing between manage it alone and institution. They'd been working out of a converted ranch house off a 6-lane road with 8 beds and a waiting list 91 names long. The director apologized 3 times for the air conditioning. I stood in that hallway thinking about 11 bedrooms sitting empty in Palm Beach, while a woman on the phone behind me told somebody there was nothing available until possibly November. That was the whole decision. I gave them a $12 million villa in Palm Beach with 11 bedrooms and a pool and a view of the water. One condition. It had to carry my wife's name, the Corali Lock House. She wanted that house her whole life and got 14 months in it, most of them in a bed. Now her name is on the front of it, and there will be people in those rooms for the next 50 years who get to sit by that pool and not be alone at the end. That is the closest thing to justice I could construct. Those 11 weeks were the strangest of my life. I held my granddaughter on my lap in that living room while an architect I'd already hired sat in a parking lot near a title company. I said good morning to my son in a driveway that had ceased to be mine 6 days earlier. I slept better in those 11 weeks than I had in 3 years. Make of that what you like. The paperwork closed in mid-June. Constance was clear. We would give proper written notice, in advance, on a date we could prove. Not because we had to be kind, so nobody could say I was sneaky. In early July, a certified letter went out to my son. It stated the property had transferred. It granted his household a courtesy occupancy period. It gave a specific vacate date. He signed for it. We have his signature. And here is what Chase Locke did with that letter. Nothing. He told no one. Not his wife. Not her parents, who were at that moment under contract to sell their house. He decided, I think, that it was a bluff, that Dad was being emotional, that he would drive over and talk, and it would get sorted the way everything in his life had gotten sorted. He never came. That is the saddest sentence in this story. My son received a letter telling him he was losing a $12 million house and did not think it was worth a 20-minute conversation with his father. Then came the afternoon in the foyer, the second week of August. The foundation was moving. Surveys, contractors, an architect with a clipboard. I was up at the main house meeting the project manager. Chase came into the front hall and asked me what all the people were doing on the property. I said they were with the foundation, and he said, "Dad, we need to be straight with each other. This has gone far enough. Gil and Vonda close on their house in 3 weeks. They're moving in here. This is theirs now. Don't ever show your face here again unless you're invited." Tatum was on the stairs. She laughed, not a big one, the kind you use when the outcome was never in doubt, and said, "Barrett, come on. You belong in a nursing home, not a palace." I did not feel triumphant. I knew exactly what was coming, and I did not enjoy it. What I felt was tired and enormously sad, and something almost like pity, because I was the only person in that hallway who knew what was about to happen. I understood I could still stop it. I could have said 4 sentences right there and prevented the whole thing. I didn't. I didn't stay quiet to punish them. I stayed quiet, because at 68, I had stopped trying to manage my son's life for him. He got a certified letter. He made a choice. For the first time in 39 years, I let my son find out what happens when you don't handle something. 11 days later, 3 moving trucks came up the drive. I was there because the foundation had asked me. The day they put the signage up. Did I know the Renshaws were closing around then? Yes. Did I know it was the exact same morning? No. But I'd be lying if I said I was sorry when the trucks came. I'm not that good a man. Here's what was in that house. 6 people from the foundation, an architect, a project manager in a hard hat, my attorney in a suit with a folder, a deputy from the sheriff's office because Constance had requested a civil standby, an ordinary thing you do when a property transfer involves people who might not have gotten the message. And on the wall of the entry hall, hung about 2 hours earlier, a brushed bronze plate that read, "The Corrali Locke House, Respite and Transitional Residence." I was sitting in a chair by the window in my hat. The front doors were standing wide open. They just walked in. Gil first, then Vonda, then Tatum with the coffee in one hand and the keys in the other. Mid-conversation, the way you do when you're arriving somewhere you own. They stopped. Vonda said, "Oh, sorry. Are we?" Then Tatum saw me. Then she saw the plate. I watched her eyes go across it, and then go back to the beginning and read it again the way you do when the words don't assemble the first time. The Corrali Locke House. Her husband's dead mother-in-law, on a bronze plate in a house her parents were moving into in 3 hours. What she didn't read was that we had been cheated. What she read, standing on the mat with her parents behind her and their house already sold, was proof the entire thing had been settled, finished, and hung on a wall in bronze, and bronze doesn't happen overnight. Somebody had known for months. I watched her get all the way to the end of that thought while she was still standing there. That is when she dropped the keys. They hit the marble and they were loud, and nobody moved to pick them up. Gil said, "Tatum, what is this?" And that is when my son walked in through the front door. He understood everything instantly. He'd had the letter for 5 weeks. Constance stepped forward and introduced herself and said, very calmly, that she was counsel for Mr. Locke, that the property had transferred in June, that written notice had been provided and signed for on a specific date, and that she had copies with her if anyone would like to see them. She'd brought copies. Tatum turned to her husband. Signed for? What is she talking about signed for? Chase didn't answer her, and that silence answered her. I got up, picked her keys off the floor, handed them back because she was shaking, and said the only thing I said that morning. There's a good facility in Wellington that takes new residents. Your mother's welcome to apply. We keep a waiting list. Then I put my hat on and walked out past the trucks. The rest of it is honest. Gil and Vonda had already closed. That was real and it was bad, and I have never for 1 second felt good about that part. Vonda called me about 6 weeks later on a Sunday. She wasn't angry. She said, "Barrett, I don't blame you. I'd have done the same thing. I just wish somebody had told us." I told her that was the truest sentence anyone had said about the whole business. We're friendly now, in a strange way. She sends a card at Christmas. Jason and Tatum's marriage did not survive it. They separated in 5 months, divorced this spring. That was not my doing. And it also was not my doing. What ended that marriage was not the house. It was that she found out, in front of her parents, that her husband had known for 5 weeks and said nothing. Chase and I did not speak for 7 months. Then in March he called. Coffee place in West Palm. It was not a reconciliation. It was very hard. He was still angry. He told me I'd humiliated him. I said yes. That's fair. I'm sorry it happened in front of your in-laws, and I would do it again. Then he said, "You could have just told me." And I said, "Chase, I sent you a certified letter." I watched him understand, really understand, that it had never once occurred to him to take his father seriously. He is 39 years old, and that was the first consequence he ever experienced that I didn't buy him out of. He works now, an actual job for somebody else. He's not good at it yet and he hates it. I have not offered him $1, and I am not going to. That is the most fathering I have ever done. My granddaughter is 2.5. I see her every other weekend. She is going to grow up knowing her grandfather, and that is worth more than that house was. The house took a year to convert. It opened this past summer. 12 residents plus 4 respite beds that turn over constantly. I go on Thursdays. I sit out by the water with whoever wants company. Mostly what I do is listen to people in their 80s tell me about their lives. There's a man there named Aurelio, 91, a merchant marine. Been everywhere on Earth twice, no living family at all. Every Thursday he asks me the same question when I sit down. "Barrett, what's the news?" I tell him the news. That's the whole friendship. He sits in the chair by the seawall. Same spot. Ends. I have to tell you about Ends because I've saved her for last on purpose. Ends cleaned that house for 22 years, going back to the old place. She sat with my wife on afternoons when I could not stand to be in the room. When Chase moved in, they cut her days, then let her go by text after 19 years with no severance because Tatum wanted to use the service. That was actually the first thing I did, week 1 with Constance. I set up an annuity for Ends, a real one, funded monthly for the rest of her life, plus her health coverage. The best money I have ever spent, and it did not require anyone to lose anything. She works at the house now, hired by the foundation as residence manager on their own, because I gave them her name and got out of the way. She runs that building. My daughter-in-law told me I belonged in a nursing home instead of a palace. She meant it as the worst thing she could think of to say, that I was finished, that people like me belong stored somewhere out of sight, while people like her enjoy the good rooms. And what I keep thinking is, she wasn't wrong about the building, she was wrong about who it was for. That house is now full of old people every single day. People in their 70s and 80s in the good rooms with a view of the water. It is, in the most literal possible sense, a nursing home in a palace. She named it. I just did the paperwork. And here's the part I want you to take away. I didn't do it for revenge. If I'd wanted revenge, I had better options, and Constance laid several of them out. I did it because standing in that dark kitchen, I finally worked out what my problem had actually been. It wasn't that my son wanted my house, it was that I didn't want anything. I had 11,000 square feet and every reason to be fine, and I could not have told you one single thing I wanted out of the rest of my life. And a man who doesn't want anything is furniture. He gets moved around the room by whoever's decorating. The day I decided what that house was for, I stopped being furniture. If you are being managed by your own family right now, if you notice people talk about your future in front of you in the third person, let me tell you from a man who let it go on for 3 years, it doesn't stop because you're patient. It stops the day you want something specific, and you say it out loud to a lawyer who has never met your children. And is there somebody in your life like my Ends? Somebody who wasn't family who showed up anyway, year after year, and never got properly thanked for it. Tell me about them below. Say their name. Those are the people this whole thing is actually about.